Never stopped us. What is the value of a friend? $3? Happy Meal? What you got? Who's got some answers for me? What's the value of a friend? I didn't say. Hopefully a friend, if you call him a friend.
Sandy and I.
Sandy? Sandy's a good friend. All right.
No, Sandy and I. We've been reading about David's ascension to the throne, basically. So we started 1 Samuel, and I was just taken by Jonathan and the type of man he must have been to do what he did, because you got the first king of Israel who's anointed, and he fights with his father on a lot of the battles and stuff, and so they're victorious, and he sees what David has done and the humility and the courage and the faith that he had, and he basically forsook his father and forsook his inheritance and forsook everything based off of a friendship with this man who had the heart of a God. And even when he was confronted with the evil of his own father trying to kill him, he still protected his friend over his blood and his family and his birthright. And that just struck me as saying, we don't say enough about Jonathan. We talk about David being a man after God's heart, but Jonathan really, there was something very special about that human being to be able to make a covenant with his brother that was much deeper than blood. I would contend to say probably his relationship was much, the husband and wife relationship is a very strong one now, but I think at that time it may not have been as quite as talked about as much about that bond, because they had multiple wives. So you didn't quite see it, but the bond that those two people had, to me, describes friendship.
Yeah. I mean, David even describes the friendship later better than having wives, right? Brooke? Okay, so look out for you. I'm going to call them the... We'll call it look out, because I'm going to use that word later. They look out for you? Jim? So encouragement, someone who will pick you up. An encourager. What? Okay. So they tell the hard things. Keep you honest. Levi? Loyalty. I like that word. That's very hand in hand with covenant keeper.
I was going to say forgiving.
Forgiving. Anyone else?
Priceless.
What?
Priceless.
Priceless?
There's no value you can place on free.
You just ruined my question. Priceless, okay. Princess. Anyone else? And this is just kind of more of a thought exercise to kind of get us into, we're going to be talking about relationship and freedom. And one of the things that strikes me about all of these is the fact of choice. Oftentimes, many of these, there are people who are obligated to look out for you, tell you hard things, be forgiving. You think of family, right? You're kind of born into a family, and so there's some obligation there. But I think one of the most striking things about true friendships that build real value is this person doesn't have to be my friend. Isn't that one of the most I would say unique things about this idea of friends is you can name, I mean, we could have gone, right, all night and listed attributes of friends, but it all comes back to this person, right, all of these attributes, to keep a covenant, it's a choice they made. And when they follow through on that, how good does that feel? How good does that feel? Feels good, doesn't it? Right? When someone forgives you. Now, this is a unique one because I like this, especially when it comes to raising kids. How good does it feel when you know that the kid just got maybe the brakes busted off him from his dad, and he comes because he's all crying and mopey and has to go, oh, I'm sorry, right? And you go tell your sister you're sorry, or go tell your brother you're sorry, and they go, sorry, right? Sorry. Does that feel good when someone's forced into an apology? Right? So part of all of this that has value, what brings value to a friendship, is the idea of choice. And that is what builds strong relationships, right? Because if you think about it, when I was growing up, I was the second child, so for a while it was just me and my brother, and he was always forced to bring me places, right? If you're going to go there, okay, bring your brother. No, okay, bring your brother. Oh, okay, bring your brother. And I'm definitely, Tim and his friends are up there, and I have to be, right, a 12-foot distance at all time. I'm there, but we're not doing the same thing, right? And I never felt good about having to be forced to be there. Oh, you know, and imagine me telling you a story. Hey, me and my brother, everywhere he went, I was with him. Because he was forced to me. Right? That ruins the effect of, or there was a time, and I think I was telling Joe this the other day, there was a time where my brother, when he was going out and he was going with a friend, and I'd with him so long, and it may just kind of been one of those natural things. He's like, hey, Jesse, come on. And the difference between him saying, Jesse, come on, and mom saying, go get your brother, doesn't that have value? Doesn't that feel different when you've been invited to be somewhere versus forced to? Now, what in the world does all this have to do with freedom and free will and our relationship with God? Huh? It's a choice. Okay? That's why God gave us free will? Okay, so it meant more, right? And so could God have made beings that he just made as complete and utter slaves just to do all of his bidding? But this kind of goes, and I got you, this kind of goes back to a question that was asked in the Isaiah class when we started getting in the heavenly realm stuff. Like, what is the reason? Why does he need a council, right? He doesn't need that. He doesn't need a council to go and, hey, what's happening over in Asia? He knows what's happening over in Asia, right? What's happening with this nation. And they're reporting back and telling them he gives them purpose, right? He builds relationships. He doesn't want zombies and robots. Obviously, he gave them free will because a lot of them fell from that, right? And he chastises them.
All the qualities are listed up there are things that we benefit from when we choose to have a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah. And that, and we're going to get there. You're getting to the end of me. The end of me. You couldn't read my notes if you had my notebook anyway. So, and I want us to bring us into this story of Joseph and his brothers. And I'm going to kind of use this as an illustration, okay? In Genesis 37, let's turn the Bibles there. Someone give me a rundown of the situation between Joseph and his brothers. What's the situation between Joseph and his brothers? Huh? He's the favorite, not the favorite brother, but the favorite son. Right? Huh? Jealousy is a huge part of that. Envy. To the point where Genesis 37 says they hated Joseph. They hated Joseph. Now, I want you to imagine being Joseph and being thrown into the pit. What would that first night feel like in the pit on your own? What is going through your mind if you're Joseph down in the pit? My God, why have you forsaken me? Okay, yeah. Could be questioning why they do it, right? What are they going to do from here? Is there's worse to come? Right? They're going to tar and feather me down here? He didn't choose to be the favorite. You know, and there's a part of me that when you read the story of Joseph, like, Joseph, keep that dream to yourself. Right? There's a part of me, hey, guess what I heard last night? Y'all gonna bow down to me, right? That probably didn't, help the relationship at all, but you're right, he didn't choose that. But what would have made, now, besides being thrown in a pit, besides being left alone at night, besides all the scary stuff that goes into that, what makes it so hard that it was your own brother or your own brothers that put you down in the pit? Choice. They chose to do this. And to me, outside of a free will, freedom to make choices of our own, they were just acting according to their nature. Right? If that's all we are chemical reactions, right? They're just acting according to their nature. Not that I couldn't get upset with them, but could you blame them? If Joseph's brothers are just acting according to, hey, that's just, the way people are. But the fact of the matter is that they had the choice to, not only did they follow through with this, so what did they do when they're on their way home? What's the decisions they made? They had to scheme and lie. Right? Okay, if I throw my brother down into a pit, let's just say I got to that point a little frustrated with him. You think by midnight I'm going, right? Or after I sold him into slavery, right? Or after the slaves came by, do you think you're going to check on him the next day? Come back and see how he's doing? Is there a conscience that comes involved? But I just want you to imagine being Joseph. Why does this hurt so much? Because they chose this. It's one of the reasons why those closest to us can either be the healing words that we need, the comforting words that we need, the encouraging words that we need, or they can be what? As valuable and as great and as powerful as are the kind words that can come from someone who's supposed to love us and is a friend, or, we're in family relationship right now, but let's just consider the family friend kind of similar. But when they do something to hurt us or say something negative against us, like, why does it hurt so bad when it's this person? Because of the choice, right? And so this idea of freedom in relationship is God is wanting us to build these relationships. God is wanting us to form communities and form bonds, but outside of a free will freedom system, it really doesn't have as much value, does it? Well, this person's only doing it because they were created to do that. This person's only created because they were created to do that. Rather than this person, maybe even to detriment of themselves. Maybe even something that they have to sacrifice their own time, their own money, their own resources. And they're still there for me, right? And so when me and Joe were talking about this, and the whole concept of this phrase or this class came with the danger of freedom. And I believe relationships, there's a lot of danger in the freedom in relationships. Because what happens, how do we act and how do we behave when we're hurt? Do we always say the things we should say? Do the things we should do? And so even though we're free to make that choice, it's fragile. It can be fragile. It can hurt. Which is what makes stories like this so powerful. Remember at the end of this story, and we're just kind of using this really at the as kind of an illustration to kind of get us into this. After Joseph, and we know this story, that's why I'm using it. After Joseph's father dies, it says in verse 15, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." Why would they think that? It's a worldly view, isn't it? That's what they did. That's what they did. And so sometimes we assume people, and this is one of those, psychology, it's kind of some voodoo stuff sometimes, but I think it works. Whenever someone's really upset with someone else's choice, right, and the way they behaved or the way they acted, a lot of times it's because they're just doing what they would have done, right? And so with Joseph, right, they're going to do evil to me. They're going to kill me. That's what Joseph's brothers thought. And would you have blamed them? Would you have blamed Joseph? I mean, could you at least understand a little bit of why he may want to take revenge and take vengeance? Let's just take Christianity out of it for a moment, all right? Larry?
As a father, I'd like to think that Joseph... As a father, I'd like to think that when Joseph was in the pit, when he was sold, that he thought of his father and the impact that his missing and his brother's actions would have on their father.
So you're thinking Joseph is thinking of his dad and the pain that his brothers brought to his father and mother. Now, what does Joseph do the first time he sees his brothers? He what? He asks about his father, but what's the first thing he does? He runs and he has to hide. He cries. Can you imagine the emotional, roller coaster that would have been the moment you see these people who did this to you so many years ago? Now think of Joseph, all that he's been through. What do I do with him? What do I do with him? And he chooses to, one, test them, right? He does test them. Have you guys changed at all? Right? Have you guys going to make a different choice this time than you would have last time? But at the end of the day, so they sent a message, verse 16, to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgressions of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of God of your father." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Here's another emotional weight. One, did Joseph's dad ever say that? Most likely not. They probably made it up. But why is Joseph so upset? What about this has crushed him? Huh? Look what he's already done. If he was going to kill him, when could he have done it? Immediately. Right then and there. And his actions have proven what? That he's not that kind of person. And so when someone thinks, well, the only reason he was being kind to me is their assumption. The only reason Joseph hasn't killed us yet is because of our Father. So he's not making the choice. He's not making the choice to forgive them. He's not making the choice to love them. He's doing it maybe out of respect for Dad and honoring Dad. Now, is that a true brotherly, family, relational thing that can, right? Why did I not beat the snot out of my brother? One, because I didn't want my dad to beat the snot out of me. But two, as you know, and that never really stopped me, until a little bit later. But I think about that now, what that would do to my parents if I showed up to my brother's house and we got in a big fight. How would that feel to them? But the power of this entire story is either you believe someone has chosen to do the right thing, or you don't. And Joseph says, you have done this thing for evil, but God has done it made it for good. You don't have to fear me. Now I want you to think of the emotional roller coaster that his brothers went through after hearing, you don't have to worry. You are forgiven. Or they actually believe it. Joseph? I just called you Joseph. I mean, it is accurate.
Thinking how this was such an example of Christ.
Yeah.
This is exactly what Jesus did. This is exactly what we're called to do. We are constantly going to be assaulted. The Apostle Paul had the same problem. He faced foes from within and from without. He would talk about he faced death threats from his own countrymen and from within the church. They treated Jesus this way. That's why he said, if they'll do it in the greenwood, what will they do in the dry when he's not there, right? If you follow Christ, you are going to suffer. And if you can't address that, and this is all part of counting the cost that Jesus talked about, we have to understand who we're following. And if we're following Jesus, we're going to get bloodied and beat up. Yeah. End of story. It's going to happen. It'll happen from places that'll break your heart. It'll happen from places that you fully expect it to happen. But we have to be prepared for that. And so like Joseph here and like Christ, it's how we respond to those things when people have hurt us. How are we responding? Are we entreating them? Are we going to them? Are we pursuing them? And are we trying to get things settled so that we can move past it? Yeah. And the struggle is when our own brethren, and this is to me such a great lesson for the church, but when our own brethren will not pursue us is what hurts. Yeah. When you feel like you've been abandoned, you asked that question earlier about a friend. When a friend hurts you, it feels like you've been betrayed. It feels like you've been abandoned in a pit because that's what you feel like. You feel like you're in this dark hole, in this dark place. That's exactly what Joseph went through. And remember, Abraham or Joseph here, this is his choice too. He could have had them killed. He could have sent an order out, had them all taken out, had them all executed, buried. Never would have known any difference. That's one of the things that attracted God to Abraham, that these were men with good hearts, and that's what he's calling us to be, is good hearts. Even when you're getting bloodied, even when somebody's punching you in the nose, be kind.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And that's why let's go to 1 Peter. We're going to start in 2, and we'll get to 4 here in a minute. But this verse, 1 Peter 2:16, has kind of been our phrase, or our verse, our scripture reading, so to speak, for the series. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. And so, once again, and I'm not trying to prove the fact that we are free will beings. We've kind of already talked a little bit about that. But what we're really looking at is, what is the purpose of God giving us freedom? And a part of this is so that the world can see people who are choosing to be different. Wait a minute. Right? And I'm going to try to come up with an example. That's not one I brought up earlier because my wife said no to that one. Let's think. Oh, who's seen the Captain America movie? All right, Captain America movie. All right, all the girls love the scene where he first steps out of that vessel, right? But you think about that, Captain America was this scrawny, little, skinny dude. He had a lot of will, he wanted to fight, all the kind of stuff, right? But his genetics were just the worst. But he had the right heart, right? And I can't imagine being a guy who's worked out his whole life, tried to do whatever, and then the first time you see this Captain America, because he got injected into his bones with a bunch of, stuff, he comes out of this this capsule, and he's jacked, right? And he's strong, he can run, he can flip cars. What's more impressive? The person who worked their entire life to earn that strength, or the person who got in a capsule? Once again, I'm trying to get out of the exact illustration of that, but a person who took an easy pill and popped up, and all of a sudden, here, take this pill and you'll be jacked. Or the person through discipline, hard work, and dedication earned those muscles, or earned that physique, or earned what they have. Which one's more impressive? Which one has more value? Right? And so it's the same thing in Christianity, because this is why I struggle so much with, and I don't normally talk about other theologies out there, but it's one of the reasons why I struggle with Calvinism so much. Calvinism has a system, now not all of them, but many, and I listen to a lot of Reformed people, essentially that you are worthless, you can't do anything, right? All that kind of stuff. But God's got to change you. And God changes you, and when God changes you, all of a sudden you're changed. And I ask, what's more impressive? What has more value? Right? When someone's saying, hey man, I see you're a new person. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this. I go, well, I took a pill, right? The Holy Spirit came upon me. I really have no control over myself. And I'm just now a new person because the Spirit has given me everything new. Or a person who says, you know what? I came in contact with the gospel in Jesus. I realize that I'm a sinner. I realize, right, that I have a long way to go to be the person that Jesus asked me to be, but I'm working towards it. With God's help, right? With the Spirit, we talked about the Holy Spirit this morning. With the Spirit helping me, right? Because that's a part of the process. But you see a person who's striving and trying with their free will to serve God. Versus a person who's like, well, I really have no control over it. I'm kind of robotic in a sense. God changed me and I have no choice now but to follow God. Which one has more value? The one with the roots?
The ones that had to grow.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't thinking garden stuff. That's all right. But let's go to 1 Peter chapter 4 with me real quick. And so this is kind of the process of people starting to notice this, right? So since therefore Christ suffered in the flesh, arm yourself with the same way of thinking, for whoever has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin. So to live for the rest of the time in your flesh, no longer for human passions, but for the will of God. You see, Peter is encouraging people to do what? What is he encouraging them to do? Live according to the will of God. Use your choice and submit to the will of God. And it has power in the fact that a person makes that choice to submit. Right? And I love that. So as to live for the rest of your time in the flesh. Right? There's a limited time you have left here on this earth. Use it to its fullest. But look at verse 3. For the time that is past suffices for doing what the Gentiles want to do, living in sensuality, passions, drunkenness, orgies, drinking, parties, and lawless idolatry. With respect to this, they are surprised when you do not join them in the same flood of debauchery, and they malign you. They malign you because you are using your choice, and your choice is a different choice than what they're making. Now, sometimes the best way to defeat foolishness and to defeat people who are acting a fool and just choosing bad choices is to be the person who never compromises in a group. You want, no, sorry. No, I won't do that. Do you think that has value when you're constantly, let's say you have a friend group and they do this thing and whatever that thing is, and you've said no for the last 15 years to it, and they know now, not even to ask Jesse about this, because Jesse won't do it. Do you think that has value? That they see a person who's choosing, has the choice. He could be going and do that thing. What's stopping Jesse from doing it? Nothing but my own will, right? My own maybe humility, my own not wanting to mess up, right? Fearing God and not wanting to have judgment for my sins. But what Peter is saying is it has value when people see that you decide to make a choice. And so when we're thinking about our relationship with God, what builds a relationship with God better? A robot or a free will being who, when he hears about the gospel, changes his mind, changes his life, and now starts striving to do the right thing? To me, there's no contest in the value of those two things. Now, how do I help others come to God? By showing them you don't have to keep making the same choice you've made. You're not programmed either, because there are people who believe that they can't stop doing whatever sin it may be. They just won't give, they can't give it. They can't believe that someone would give it up. Well, I can give you 100 or 1,000 other people who have given that up. And if it's just God going kaboom and changing you, right, well, you just got to sit around and wait for God then to do it. Sorry, God didn't choose you. Even though you may want to, you can't. Right? Now, what is Matthew 7? What is the value of Matthew chapter 7 of the ask, seek, and knock? What is the value of when Jesus says, ask, seek, and knock? They're all choices, aren't they? They're all choices. Now, just because we have a choice, we're not wholly leaning upon our own actions and our own worthiness and all those things. Who are we going to for help? I was listening to this guy, I can't remember his name, but if I said his name, you guys may know who I'm talking about. And he was talking about what a true friend is and true value of friendship. And I can't remember the exact context, but he says, you want to know when you really show someone that you're a true friend? It's not when you are there for them, but when you actually reach out for help. Because being there for somebody, I can be there for a neighbor who's not really a close friend, right? Just because I'm a decent person, I'm a good person, and if I see someone in need, right, I want to be there to help. I'm sure a lot of us, if we saw someone in need, would be there for help. That is not what the value of a true friendship is. It's when someone comes to you and says, Jesse, I need help. What have they just done? They trust you. So when someone comes and brings something deep, maybe dark, and they bring it to you, that's when you realize, wow, our relationship, they didn't choose to bring that to this person. They could have brought it to that person. They brought it to me. And so now it's in my hands, right, to either make the choice to do evil, to take what they've said to me, take what they brought to me, and to do evil with it, or to do good with it. And so in 1 Peter chapter 4, they're surprised. Why are they surprised? What's so surprising when someone makes a different choice than the group? Takes courage. They realize that it can be done, but who would make that choice? What else? Why else would someone be surprised? I know someone's got a thought. Yeah. And what Peter's talking about is you don't run with them anymore. Change is hard for people to grasp. When there's legitimate change in your life, true change, sometimes your friends may not even believe it. And they may not like you anymore after that. I remember when I went around and told my friends that I was going to be a preacher. It was probably some of the funniest memories I have of just their looks on their faces. And I could tell it changed our relationship immediately. It was slow, but eventually I realized this was the beginning of the end because I was walking down a path that they weren't going. And our paths weren't going to cross. Right? The things that I slowly began to put my time and energy into. And thankfully I converted one friend into it. It was very good. But I've got a friend whose best friend growing up, he'll talk to me and text me every now and then, but I can tell my decision to follow God and follow Jesus has just completely changed our relationship. Right? So, now watch. Let's keep going. Let's get down all the way to verse 7. So the end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be self-controlled, sober-minded, for the sake of your prayers. Above all, keep loving one another earnestly, since love covers a multitude of sins. Show hospitality to one another without grumbling. I'm going to tell you right now, when you experience true sacrificial love and hospitality for the first time in your life, when you're at a place when you need it, you will never forget it. You will never forget when someone chooses you in a time in your life when you need it. And it's one of the reasons why I think the Scriptures is telling us love covers a multitude of sins. And part of that is the person loving me a perfect person? No. But when I see this, can I forgive someone pretty quickly? Someone who's shown me true, genuine love? I can. Someone who's taken me in, maybe not just into their home, but into their family, into their friend group, into their whatever it is, who's invited you in, brought you in. Will that cover a multitude of sins? The choice, the freedom to choose builds relationships. And if a church can grasp this concept that, hey, you know what? I normally wouldn't be in your friend group. I'm a Yankee. Right? I tell this story all the time. I'm a Yankee from up north, and I like hockey more than football. Most of you would have just, if there was a resume for being your friend, right? I probably wouldn't have got past page 1. Right? 1, if you asked me what my favorite pop was, see, some of you just cringed, right? It's called pop, right? We wouldn't be friends, right? And I know those are silly and fun things, but I'm being serious. Christianity is about Josephs, being Joseph, seeing the big overall story and seeing people who serve God and see God's will and choose to treat people the way that God would treat others. That has power, that has value. That's what brings relationships together. And what we're going to be looking at next week, because I know I'm going to be running out of time here, it's exactly what God's looking for. And we're going to end, let's just go to Luke 14 real quick. Let's just run there before the next bell rings. Why is it in John chapter 6 that Jesus turns to his disciples and say, will you leave me also? When after he made his statement, he preached his sermon, 5,000 plus people turn and walk away from him, and he turns to his disciples, will you leave me also? Because what he's saying is, if you don't want to be here, you can leave. I want people who want to be here. Joseph? Joseph, that's just there. That's just there. You're no longer Joe. You're Joseph.
Kathy and I were worshiping up in northern Kentucky. We had a friend, a man and wife that we got real close to, went on vacation with them, and was really close to them. And it had kind of fallen upon his wife. She kind of had accepted this place of taking two members of the congregation that were difficult and making sure they got to doctors and helping them out. And we were sitting at dinner one night, and she was complaining about all this work and the impact that it's having on her and blah, blah, blah. And finally her husband set his fork down and he wiped his mouth and he looked at her and said, "Serve with love or don't serve at all."
Yeah.
And then he picked up his fork and went back to eating. And that was profound to Kathy and I. That left an impact.
So I want to pick on that. Well, we're not even going to Luke 14 now. I think that's the power of Philippians chapter 2 where it says, do all things without grumbling and complaining. Because imagine someone brings you into your home, takes care of you, washes you. Let's use the Good Samaritan for a moment. And then you find out later that he's like, "Oh man, you should have seen that night. It was horrible. Jesse was dirty and nasty, smelled like a fish, right? I had to wash his pits. Then he was hungry, and he needed food. But that whole time but you find out later, it was just they grumbled and complained about it the whole time. What does that do to this? That's not that, right? That's not that. That's pity. Do people like to be pitied? They don't like to be pitied. They like to be loved, right? They like to be known. They like to be, lifted up and encouraged. And that goes back to that list that we had all the way at the beginning. And it's the same thing with Jesus here, where he says, if anyone comes to me, does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. He doesn't want you just to make a small choice. This isn't a small choice to follow Jesus. It's why I struggle with 7-year-olds making this choice. It is the most important decision you will ever make in your life. And Jesus wants to know he's got all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your strength, all of your mind. Now, that will look different at different times in your life, and there's growth in that. But it's a choice I want to. He says, and if you're not willing to pick up the cross and follow me, he says, you can't be my disciple. And so we're going to pick that idea up next week, and then we're going to look at some things in Genesis with our relationship with God as well. All right, thank you.